You could help support the One Thing podcast by visiting our affiliate sponsors. I've teamed up with Healthgevity, which is a company that I learned of over the last several years. I really enjoy what Healthgevity is doing. They've revolutionized the wellness industry by providing the finest quality and most effective nutritional products for ultimate health span. They work in tandem with doctors, patients, and researchers to design real advanced formulas that, frankly, I have not seen done on this level before. Please visit them and see what they have to offer. If you find various products that you're interested and you're looking for a discount, you can enter in the code ONETHING, all one word, one thing, for a 10% discount. This will not only provide you access to excellent health supplementation products, but also will help support the podcast. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your support. Trauma isn't always the car crash or the battlefield. Sometimes it's the invisible script you follow every day without knowing who wrote it. These are the words of our guest, Dr. Shahrzad Jalali. Welcome to the One Thing podcast, where we break down the habits, mindsets, and hidden levers that move the needle in your health and life. I'm Dr. Adam Rindy, and today we're shining a light on a kind of trauma that most of us never see coming. My guest is Dr. Shahrzad Jalali, a licensed clinical psychologist, Jungian analyst, and somatic trauma specialist, whose forthcoming book, The Fire That Makes Us, drops next year. Shahrzad's superpower is spotting silent trauma, the unrecognized emotional wounds that high achievers quietly carry into their boardrooms, marriages, and even into their gut health. She blends depth psychology, think dream analysis and archetypes, with body-based tools like EMDR and brain spotting, giving clients a full spectrum path to healing. Stick around and you'll learn how to tell the difference between everyday stress and identity scripts steering your decisions behind the scene. A 90-second practice that you can do tonight to reclaim emotional autonomy when triggers hijack your day. One quick cue that therapists and couples use to spot when childhood patterns replay in real time. And while your digestive flare-ups might not be about what you ate, but the unresolved story your body is still trying to digest. As always, all links will be below in our show notes. If you find value here, please take 5 seconds and hit follow and share the episode with someone who needs a fresh lens on healing. All right, everybody, take a deep breath, maybe two, and enjoy the episode with Dr. Shahrzad Jalali. Dr. Jalali, welcome to the One Thing podcast. It's so great to be here with you today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to talk with you today. This has been a date on my calendar I circled a while back, and so I'm glad it's finally here.
I am very excited as well.
So I want to jump into your work and your personal experience and sort of background related to trauma, since it's a lot of the work you do is working with trauma. There's a term that you use called silent trauma, and wounds that like high functioning people might overlook. And it sounds like, from learning about you, there's been some personal experience with this. And what was the first clue that you carried silent trauma?
It was the moment I realized I could talk about pain or my pain very eloquently, even while being completely disconnected from it. I was helpful, high achieving, empathic, and emotionally absent from my own body to some extent. The silent wasn't around me, it was inside of me. That's when I understood high functioning often hides high fracturing.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And was it a process that, you were prompted to explore, or did it just dawn on you one day, just in your own self-reflection?
I had this vivid memory, and I talk about this in the book, that I was just going through life, breezing through life, thinking that I have processed my trauma and I'm doing really well. But I would catch moments of numbness or essentially not being present in my body, not enough to bring my attention to it to be able to actually do something about it. Until one morning I woke up. I vividly remember this, even though it was almost a decade and a half ago. I opened my front door and I stepped outside, and it was the first time I understood what Mother Nature meant
Hmm.
because I felt the sun on my face and I felt the wind in my hair, and I started to feel sensation in my body again. And prior to that, I was completely unaware of the fact that I haven't been feeling this for a while
Mm.
because I was just on autopilot, right? Like the rest of us living life. And I stood there for a while and it felt like someone was giving me a big hug. Until that moment, I don't think I had ever thought about the phrase Mother Nature. I mean, English is my second language, but I would always hear that phrase and use it. And it was the first time I realized that nature can be very nurturing and it can be a good holding environment for you, literally. And that's when I realized I had been hosting a lot of numbness to potentially escape something that I wasn't ready to fully absorb and kind of step into the pain, I suppose.
Wow, that's really profound, and I really like the connection between Mother Nature and a hug. That's the type of thing that a mother would give you. So, at the time this was unfolding for you, did you reroute your therapeutic practice and your personal way you worked with clients?
That's a great question. I think it reoriented everything for me. I realized insight alone doesn't change us. You can understand your patterns and still repeat them. That's when I began to integrate into my practice like existential meaning and somatic tracking. So I no longer just ask clients what's happening to them. I ask, where does that live in your body? And what meaning do you assign to it?
Mhm.
I think it helps me take them from a top down processing to more of a bottom up approach, because for people who tend to intellectualize stuff, and I was one of them, we tend to want to think our way through stuff. But you can't think your way out of pain. You have to feel pain.
Hmm. That's a scary transition for a lot of people, to work now from the bottom up and start to actually feel their feelings and feel their emotion. And from my understanding, you use a number of different modalities. One pair that you use is Jungian dream approaches with body tracking. Can you talk about that and how that's helped you with working with people versus something like CBT?
Yes. When I went to school, education was heavily based on CBT techniques. Shortly after, I realized that that is not sufficient for the type of work I like to accomplish. So I got a lot of training through the Jung Institute in LA. CBT can teach people how to think differently. But Jungian and somatic work ask what part of you is still dreaming the old wound.
Mhm.
So when a client tracks the physical sensation of, for example, a dream image, a clenched jaw, a frozen chest, they don't just reframe, they reclaim. The unconscious now has a way of speaking to us in symbolism. And then the body answers in sensations. Together, they let the whole self heal and not just remain in the thought process, which we can, I think, most of the time work our way around our thought process. We're very good at doing that.
Mhm. So, for people unfamiliar with Jungian dream approaches, can you just give us a high level view of what that involves?
Absolutely. So Jung was very big on the unconscious, both the personal and the collective. And he said we mainly live life with our conscious mind, which is not the majority of, what we have access to. So in our dreams, because the conscious mind is no longer alert to try to control the matter, the unconscious mind kicks in. And if we learn how to communicate with it, it gives us a lot of symbolism to depict to us what our fears are, where we're stuck, why we're not functioning the way we like to. To give you an example, let's say I like to lose weight, but I find myself not eating properly or skipping the gym every day. So basically, I am working against my true desire. There is a component in me that does that. Now, if you ask my conscious mind, I'm like, I don't know, I really want to lose weight. It's really bothering me. We see this with our clients all the time, right? So that's where the unconscious kicks in. And if we learn how to communicate with it, if we learn how to interpret its language, which is mainly our fantasies and our dreams, to tell you the truth, then it will communicate with us and we can start to build a relationship with our unconscious. And I think that's the most phenomenal thing that we can ever do. Because once we can do that, we are, first of all, never ever lonely ever again. Mm. And on top of that, we are always connected to ourselves. And when you're connected to yourself, you can connect to others. And when you connect to others, you can connect to the world. So all of these things are interrelated in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is such a metric for mental health is that feeling of self-connection, the authentic relationship with yourself. So that was really well explained. Thank you. So I'd love to hear about one client or an example that you might be willing to share that went through this process and released some body held trauma and it maybe happened sooner than you had thought. Like, not a long drawn out process, more was surprising to you how the body held trauma just revealed in a session.
Yes, that's a very interesting question. So, one client in particular came in with a lot of tightness in her throat. We used some somatic anchoring work to kind of take her more into her sensations. And then, as she was kind of focusing on her body, a dream surfaced. She was telling me that she had a dream that she was drowning in the dream. And as we tracked the imagery, a childhood memory emerged. So she is crying in front of her mother, who usually shuts down every time that she cries. And then she started to whisper, I learned early that silence kept me safe. And that sentence wasn't just insight, it was a release. And the tears that followed were her grieving that part of her that had to do that to survive her childhood and continue to do so as an adult, even though there was no need for it anymore. And we had a breakthrough.
Wow. That's really special. And, it gives, I'm sure there also is after a breakthrough, there's also grief that comes up.
Absolutely. Yes. A lot of grief. Most of us tend to function by suppressing our grief, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a very normal way of getting through life. If we were to feel everything that comes at us, none of us would survive our lives. But I guess the point is to go back and feel it in small increments that we can handle, sometimes in the presence of a guide that can hold that environment for us. I think that's the only way we can get through it.
One of the modalities that you use that I see a number of people that I've referred up to or seen some significant benefited out of is called brain spotting. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about brain spotting, what it is, and some of the controversies around it?
I feel like there's a lot of controversy around techniques like EMDR, brain spotting. In some ways, I have to admit, rightfully so, because when I first got trained in either one of those approaches, I walked away thinking this is very cult-like, and I don't want to practice this in my, private practice.
Mhm.
I understand their wisdom. They try to really kind of focus on the way they do it, just because I feel like when you give people a tool, not everyone is very well versed in using that tool. And if they make people stay between certain guidelines, I guess they are diminishing chances of people misusing these tools or potentially traumatizing people any further.
Yeah.
I don't follow rules and structures really well. I'm sorry to admit. So I struggled with this, especially since I feel like therapy is very art like. So I don't think an artist can ever say, I can produce two of the same piece of art, right?
Mhm.
And I don't see myself doing the same work with any two patients. So every time I go into a session, I'm walking down kind of a fresh path with the patient. But I like to use these things as tools that allows me to kind of get the patient to use techniques like bilateral stimulation to get the two hemispheres of the brain to communicate, or to take them to the body, allowing them to kind of notice the sensations that rise up and finding comfort enough to feel them and start to develop language around them. And so I would say I mainly use them as techniques, but honestly, I explain the process to the patients. I help them follow their body's cues and hopefully eventually learn how to do that on their own.
So is it fair to say that brain spotting is sort of a different variety of EMDR, just a different strategy, a different technique?
I think they're very similar. EMDR heavily focuses on the eye movements. Brain spotting doesn't do it that way. It can have you kind of look at one particular point that accesses
Mhm.
a sensational signal for longer than brain spotting does.
Mhm.
But I think the point behind both techniques is the same thing, which is you're getting into a portal to help the client actually access their body and their pain and their sensations, and reach another portal or the same through which they can release it versus holding on to it essentially.
Mhm. Makes sense. So one of the things that you have talked about is zeroing in on unconscious patterns. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And one of those is like a childhood script, something that's playing out from lifelong childhood reenactment. So when you're working with people, what's the quickest cue that you see that someone or a couple or a relationship is reenacting childhood scripts?
Yes. So when the fight escalates, but the content stays shallow. So now two people are yelling at each other over logistics or, washing the dishes. Their tone is full of grief and fear. And I'll often say, you're not fighting about the dishes, you're fighting about being invisible at 8 years old, for example.
Mm.
That's when the child self is speaking. I find this a lot in couples in particular, because I think when we're doing individual therapy, we tend to show the therapist for the most part the version of ourselves we want the therapist to see. But in couples, sometimes I feel like we can bypass that very quickly because people have a way of triggering each other's childhood wounds, especially in a romantic relationship.
Mhm.
And when I mentor other therapists, my interns often get stuck in, oh, they came in with this problem, we're trying to help them solve it. But it's never about that problem. So when you try to solve that problem for the patient, you're colluding with the patient and not much comes out of it. Everyone leaves the session feeling very frustrated, the therapist included.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, we can't even solve these things in our own marriages or lives. How do we
Right.
solve it in somebody else's?
Right.
It helps when you go to the childhood script because people usually just go into a deeper layer of understanding and processing pain with that.
Okay. Yeah. I think we all can relate to those types of heated or passionate discussions, if you want to call it that. If someone's out there listening saying, that happens all the time, is
Mhm.
there any mini interventions you found successful that are just ways to catch yourself when you're in that disruptive loop?
Yes, pause before you respond. Press your feet into the ground. Breathe. Silently ask yourself, what does my nervous system need right now? That question alone can interrupt an entire pattern.
Love it. Yeah.
My nervous system is my best friend right now. I feel like I have this internal dialogue with it all the time. Like, what do you need? Do you need me to sit down? Do you need a glass of water? Do you need me to lie down? Do you need me to be kinder to myself? I think for the first few decades of my life, I just abused it. I made it do things it didn't want to do and I pushed it around until it started to take revenge. I'm sure I still do on many, many micro levels, but I've started to approach it very differently.
Yeah. I mean, it'll take you down if you don't someday start to attend to it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's beautiful to hear about your own personal dialogue. It's, very inspiring. Sounds very loving and, things that we can all learn from. So back to more higher functioning clients. You talked about one of your clients where there was trauma stuck in her throat area. Is there other body areas that you see trauma hiding out? You know, I think most people by now have heard of this term, the body keeps the score, or what have you. Where do you see the biggest somatic patterns?
The gut is a huge one.
Mm.
90% of our serotonin gets produced in our gut. The jaw, a lot of times when I'm talking to people, I see their jaws are locked or they don't have the tendency to relax it. The space between the shoulders,
Definitely.
will often say when I bring their attention to it, I don't feel stress, while their body hasn't exhaled in hours. These are the quiet bracing patterns where emotion was swallowed instead of spoken. And I usually go to my own body. And when I notice that, I start taking a deep breath and I kind of let myself sink into my seat and kind of find comfort in my body. And I notice that the patient starts to mirror me and maybe kind of goes down that path and says, oh, I don't know, I needed that. That felt so much better.
Hmm. It's really, really interesting. There's these centers. I hear a lot about like pelvis being a trauma area. Do you see that come up?
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it could be in pretty much any area if you think about it, right? I'm fascinated by the vagus nerve and the patterns that you pointed out some of them seem very vagus nerve oriented. So,
Yes, women in general tend to hold a lot of trauma in their pelvic area, but the good thing is they can also ground really well through their seat bones. So when I feel
mm,
like they're struggling, if a person has difficulty finding a body part that feels grounded and safe, I usually take them to that area and get good results.
yeah, and something you said earlier in the conversation, which is like, what does your body need right now? You know, or what are you needing right now? I think that's such a great, as you mentioned, it's such a great prompt versus, how are you feeling right now? Or, it takes you to that connection.
Hmm.
So there's some very interesting things that I've read about your work that I'd love to kind of hear your insight on emotional autonomy. And what does that look like? I think you've talked about it from people who are from a background of mixed cultures or other, kind of contexts that it seems to be more apparent. Can you talk about what that term means and just share with us what you've learned?
Absolutely. It looks like this sentence: I can honor my family, but still choose myself.
Hmm.
That moment when someone stops outsourcing their worth. They still carry loyalty, but they no longer carry guilt. That's autonomy. And most of us struggle with this because we tend to set ourselves on fire to warm somebody else up. And because our brains are wired for connection, and most of us have learned at a very early age that in order to have love, we have to self sacrifice. We mix these things up and we don't tend to honor that autonomy. In fact, we just want to please people.
Wow. That just lands really strongly. I mean, not only for myself, but so many people I've worked with over the years from various backgrounds. And, usually there's usually like one person in the family that really has just let go of their autonomy completely and everything's kind of, they're the glue. And you see what takes, the toll it takes over the years. So for people who, maybe like a younger generation that's trying to be loyal to their family, but maintain their personal autonomy, and they resonate with what you're describing, what's one clue that they might see that they're kind of slipping back into losing autonomy?
I want to take them to their body language, shrinking or hardening.
Hmm.
So the voice may get small or very sharp. And the shoulders may pull in or lock up. The body can become an armor or just kind of turn into regressive formats. There are all survival methods, and they are all trying to say, don't leave me, because that's the most scary thing for us humans. We're the only species that won't survive if someone gives birth to us and doesn't take care of us. All the rest of the animals can find a way to survive, right? We don't. So our brains are wired for that connection, and anything that alludes to us losing that is devastating for us. And our body tends to respond to it that way. So we want to catch those cues and respond to them accordingly.
So these are cues from other family members, or they're cues from
Your own body.
Hmm.
This is how I would depict it. Let's say, especially you find this a lot in collective cultures where there is this desire to please your family members, or there's this desire to kind of pay back for everything they've invested in you growing up and becoming an adult. And for that to happen, they need you to be a particular person, behave a particular way, show off a particular way. Now, I hear this a lot from patients where they tell me, I'm a high functioning surgeon, but when I sit in front of my father, I become this 5-year-old boy that my father says, don't talk to your brother that way. Like, you're being rude or whatever. And I see myself becoming this big mentally, obviously, right? And this shows up in your body language. Like you may sit back in your chair, you may put your head down, you may lose your autonomy to just kind of sit up and respond politely like you would if it was somebody in the outside world. So they are these family dynamics that take us back to the roles we played as children. And somehow, every time we're put back in that dynamic, we don't have the ability to overcome it. We revert back to the child version of ourselves that had to endure that dynamic to survive it. And it's very actually space opening and life changing when we take that dynamic and we try to use our metacognition to respond to it differently.
Yeah. What I love about how you unpack that is that you're not saying that this message of you just cut away from your family and reestablish yourself and reject your youth or you reject your child. You're saying, you can honor it and still step into, the life you're creating for yourself with healthy boundaries and, healthy sense of autonomy. So It just seems like something I think a lot of people can relate to because nobody wants to, turn away from their family just to claim themselves.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Let me comment on that. I think when I first started to practice here, a lot of people would come to me from different therapists and say, "Oh, I haven't spoken to my dad for the past 20 years. Why?" My previous therapist said that he was a raging narcissist and that the best way I could handle this was to cut off my relationship. Especially in the Western world, I see a lot of people turning to cut off from family of origin to kind of, live their lives in peace. I often give people the analogy that cutting off a blood family member, unless it's in extreme circumstances, it's kind of like cutting off your leg. Yes, you can live without it, but you are leaving yourself with a huge emotional wound, right?
Yes.
That helps you or makes you react to other people in your life or other phenomena in your life because there's always this unresolved trauma, something that you never could handle. I hardly ever recommend people cutting people off, but I do recommend people changing their narrative around the people in their lives. And I think that's what I get to in my book, that your life story is your life story. You can't go back and undo certain things that have happened to you. You can't disown your parents and get new ones and, kind of start over again. But they are painful because you have a particular narrative around them that makes you out to be the victim. Once you take that narrative and reauthor it, once you rewrite it, now it becomes part of your strength. It's no longer the
Yeah.
that limits you. And that's where emotional growth is.
Wonderfully said. Thank you. I'd love to go into hearing more about your upcoming book. Can you just reveal a little bit about the title and maybe like tease about one of the chapters?
Absolutely. The book is called The Fire That Makes Us. And I chose that title because fire can have a very negative and positive connotation at the same time. Fire is something that burns us, kills us, destroys us, but it also forges us into something else, right? So the book is based on a personal trauma that I endured at one point. The trauma was a car accident, a very bad car accident that left me very hurt, and some family members passed. And I started to do some of my own journaling when I was going through therapy and trying to heal from this. And one of my sisters at one point picked up some of my writing, read it, and said, "I think you need to turn this into a book. It can help people." So I still based it on myself and what I went through, but I also took the trauma, the relational mainly trauma that I had witnessed in my clinical practice over the past decades, and I kind of put that together with the story that I was already working on. So the book is a little bit different than your average self-help book. It starts with a storyline about a woman named Charlotte, as I said, based on myself. And every chapter, the storyline stops and I talk about the psychological dilemma that's happening in that moment.
Mm.
And then I talk more about how to overcome that dynamic. So I'm hoping it will provide people with some level of guidance in navigating their own wounding and learning how to reapproach it.
Well, I want to, in just a moment here, maybe a little bit of like a practical tip from the book that maybe you'd be willing to share. Before we get into that, if possible, could you just share one myth that you'd love to bust that's in your profession or that you come across that you really like to bring some light to and clarity to?
That we are broken.
Hmm.
All of us are exactly who we need to be. And the parts of us that we feel like are broken are parts of us that have endured hardship. But there is another side to enduring hardship, which is strength. We survived it. If we're alive, it means we survived it. So we've learned something, we've overcome something. And what I help the patients do is turn that around because often when they come to me, they're stuck on this side, which is this happened and I'm broken and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love several times during our conversation, you've referenced like parts of ourselves. And, I think part of that healing is realizing that those parts that we think are broken or what have you, they're still there. They're just needing that connection that you're talking about. Well, this is wonderful. I'd love to take some practices into, this evening if possible. Like if people are listening to this and they're, let's say, for example, the emotional autonomy really connected with them. Is there any practice they could do, like a short practice, maybe lying down and in bed or relaxing that may help them reclaim their emotional autonomy?
Absolutely. You can do this sitting down or lying down, whichever is more accessible to you. But wherever you are, place maybe one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. Inhale deeply and say silently to yourself, I am not what is expected of me. I am not what is expected of me. And then exhale slowly and say, I am what I choose to become.
Mm.
I am what I choose to become. Gently press your body or your feet on any surface beneath you, kind of finding groundedness. And close with one last breath and whisper to yourself, I belong to myself.
Wow. Well, that was very special. Great way to wrap up our conversation. I really appreciate you being here. We will make sure people have links to all of your websites and social media links. And then can you tell us when to expect the book to launch?
Yes, I'm very excited. It's going to be 9/9, so September 9, and I can't wait to share it with everyone. I hope people find some refuge in it.
Okay, great. And is there a pre-order link or anything like that up on Amazon?
Yes, so as we get closer to the date, we're going to definitely share all of that with everyone. I want to invite your listeners who are interested to follow us on Align Remedy or Dr. Jalali. They can find us under both. And we'll share all the information as we get closer to the date.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for being here. And I'd love to keep in touch for possibly another visit together.
It would be my pleasure.
That was just a wonderful conversation with Dr. Jalali. I did not expect it to be so profound. I was very excited to be with her based on her specialties and interests. What I really appreciated was her ability to tie in somatic practices with a deep psychotherapy model. And especially, we had a great discussion about autonomy and how in so many cultural backgrounds, there is a loss of autonomy due to commitment to family and service to family. And she so eloquently walked us through a framing of how to continue to be of service and dedicated to our families while maintaining a sense of autonomy and agency. These were valuable insights that I think, frankly, that you probably won't hear from many practitioners. She has a lot of lived experiences with her own personal trauma and applying some of this somatic work with her clients and herself. The other thing that was really special is just to hear about her own relationship with her nervous system and how she's in constant dialogue with attending to her nervous system, which, as a healer or a practitioner, psychotherapist, she's obviously putting herself in the best place to help others while helping herself. Very inspirational. Let's all take a look at her upcoming book release and support her work, get the word out. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with others. If you really feel like sharing how it landed with you, please visit us on my show's Instagram page and leave some comments on the One Thing Instagram page. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you visit our sponsors and subscribe to our channels so that we can continue to provide this valuable content for you all. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.